My name is Dr Vanderhoof. I'm a pediatric gastroenterologist. I trained in pediatric gastroenterology at UCLA and been doing pediatric GI ever since. Spent most of my career in academic medicine. I have a strong interest in the gut microbiome and in the area of probiotics in particular. Given the importance of the microbiome, the obvious question is what we can do to modify it or change it in order to promote health and resistance to disease and immune dysfunction. If we decide that we want to try to modify our microbiome with a probiotic, how do we decide which one of these things to use? So the first thing that I want to say is that you need to pick something very specific, something that influences a certain outcome. So you need to be fairly selective on how you figure this out. There are a lot of different things that you can buy over the counter that are called probiotics. And by definition, a probiotic should be something that influences health and wellness in a positive way. And in fact, a lot of the stuff that you can buy over the counter doesn't really do that, and I don't think really meets this definition. But there are certain organisms that can do this. And these are organisms that can live through the transit of the upper gastrointestinal tract that's designed to kill bacteria, make it down into the small bowel and proliferate in the lower part of the small bowel and colon, and in the process of doing so, influence the immune system and influence the microbiome in a positive way. There are not many organisms that have been demonstrated to be able to do that. The first thing you have to get is an organism that is alive when it's ingested. And so if you find a very good organism, but you put it in a tablet, and by the time the customer or the individual consumes the tablet, everything is dead, it's not going to work because that organism has to be alive to proliferate in the gastrointestinal tract. Here, we have to find a way to keep the organism alive and package it in a very certain way so that it's survivable on the shelf for a long enough period of time that somebody can buy it and consume it. Then when you take it, it has to traverse the stomach and the upper part of the small bowel. Here, you have to have an organism that can make it through there. Most so-called probiotics can't do that. So you have to have a very specific organism that's very acid and bile resistant. The next thing you have to have is that it has to be able to adhere to the lining of the bowel so that it can initiate a communication with the underlying immune cells. And in order to do this, it has to have some special characteristics that allow it to attach and communicate. It also needs to be able to preferentially secrete some chemicals that will defend itself from other bacteria and create a healthy environment for itself and for other organisms like it to exist. So if you look for all these different characteristics, you can take a very large number of organisms and hone that down to a very few organisms. And then you take those organisms and you look at what kind of benefits they may have clinically. And the clinical studies are key to telling you what the probiotic can do. Does it protect people from disease? Does it protect people from allergy? Does it influence the microbiome in a positive way that might protect against long-term illness by preventing dysbiosis? All of these things need to be tested in a clinical setting and published as randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. The original developers of Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG strain did this. They studied hundreds of different strains of bacteria in order to come down to selecting this one particular organism that ultimately became the organism that we selected for utilization in Culturelle. This Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG strain has been through all that and has several hundred different clinical publications, over 200 clinical trials, many of them in children, that show exactly what this organism can do. For example, Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG has been shown to be beneficial in reducing the risk of acquisition of illnesses in daycare, nosocomial illnesses in hospitalized children, antibiotic-associated diarrhea in children. It appears to have the ability to induce allergic tolerance or allergen tolerance in infants, in children with cow milk protein allergy. It appears to function well in reducing the risk of and the severity of atopic dermatitis. So all of these are clinically proven benefits published in reputable journals describing well-designed, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trials. This is how we as clinicians make our decisions about utilizing or recommending specific probiotics for clinical use. Most of the time, the strain I end up recommending is Lactobacillus rhamnosus strain GG because it has the most clinical studies, the most demonstrated clinical benefits, the most clinical experience and clinical data behind it, so it just ends up winning. Back when I initially helped to develop the Culturelle product, we selected Lactobacillus rhamnosus strain GG because we thought it would be capable of doing all the things that we've now been able to show that it does effectively.